Hi there, this is Kyle. Today's video is an exclusive documentary that you will only find here on this channel. While we are currently working on a major case that requires extensive research, I remain committed to delivering 3 full true crime videos every week. Recently, a few television networks reached out, asking to feature some of the exclusive content we produce here, and I appreciate that interest. But this work is made for you first. To everyone who has been supporting the channel from the start, thank you. And to all the new subscribers, welcome. Your support is the reason this channel keeps growing and keeps uncovering stories that deserve to be told. Now let's begin. In this true crime documentary, we uncover the heartbreaking case of Robin and Manny Aldridge.
Manny was a very loving, giving, generous kid.
Have a good school year. Bye now.
I don't know as a 17-year-old that Manny wanted to admit that she was having the kind of trouble that she was having.
I'm awesome and I'm still alive and I will talk to you later.
On December 5th, 2014 at 11:47, emergency lines received several calls from residents of Rugby Avenue. They reported a large fire breaking out at house number 1627. Within 2 minutes, a police car that was close to the scene arrived. 3 minutes later, the fire department reached the house, ready to respond. But as smoke filled the sky, one question remained. What would be waiting for them inside once the flames were contained?
Police arrived first, had heavy smoke conditions. Our unit arrived 3 minutes later after the initial call. They had heavy fire conditions on the first floor and smoke on the second floor as well.
According to the fire department report released the following day, it took nearly 1 hour and 25 minutes before crews could enter the first floor of the house. The flames had been that strong. Officers on the scene held on to the hope that no one was inside. Neighbors had mentioned that the car of the woman who lived there was not parked outside, which gave them a moment of relief. That sense of comfort did not last long, because once the team stepped into the house, the first thing they saw was a visible stain on one of the white walls, and in that instant, everything changed. What followed was 72 hours of developments so unusual that investigators would later describe this case as one of the strangest they had dealt with in over 2 decades. Next to the stain was the home security system, leading to an early assumption that perhaps this was a burglary gone wrong. Without hesitation, the search moved upstairs, but the true revelation was not waiting on the second floor. It was hidden below in the basement. By this time, Detective Stephen Kaysen of Charlottesville PD had arrived at the scene, and he would go on to play a central role in piecing this case together. When he learned that the first and second floors were empty, he made his way down the basement stairs, and the first thing that came into view was the body of a woman in her late 50s. Her head covered by her jacket, her body bearing multiple wounds and signs of severe head trauma. Just 7 feet away lay a second body wrapped tightly in a carpet, her feet bound and her body showing the same signs of repeated strikes and a shattered head. Despite the grim discovery, one thought became clear to Detective Stephen. This was no burglary. The intensity and excess pointed to something driven by raw emotion.
This was an evil and senseless and brutal crime. Robin Aldridge, 58 years old, was a teacher in the Albemarle County school system. Late Friday evening, she was beaten to death in her own home, as was her daughter, 17-year-old Manny. We may want to talk to friends and other persons of interest that may help get a better understanding for what might have led to this horrific tragedy.
The investigators made their plan clear from the very beginning, because a case that looked like it might be driven by emotion could only be solved by understanding the personal lives of those inside the house. The first detail that caught their attention was not even inside. It was the mailbox standing outside the front door. Among the letters was one sent from the University of Virginia Alumni Association, addressed to a man named Gary John Green. That raised the first serious question, because the woman who lived there was Robin Aldridge. So who was this man who had mail delivered to her home? When detectives looked deeper, they learned that Gary John was not just anyone. He was a co-owner of the property and Robin's former husband. Suddenly, new questions surfaced. Could this be about a dispute over the house? Did he want to reconcile and she refused? Or was something else entirely hidden from view? Around 5 in the morning, officers drove to Gary's nearby residence to deliver the devastating news of his former wife's passing and to search for answers. When he heard the words, his reaction was immediate. His shock so raw that questioning him was almost impossible. Yet he insisted on going to the house at once. There he stood still in tears, before calming enough to explain that he and Robin had shared more than a marriage. He had known her since the late 70s, and even after their divorce in 1999, their bond had never disappeared. He remained a close friend to Robin and her adopted daughter Manny, and he admitted he had always thought of Manny as his own, since Robin had brought her home from Ukraine in 2000. When asked why Robin chose to adopt from Eastern Europe, he explained that during her high school years, she had traveled there on a trip and fell deeply in love with the culture and the people. After years of struggling to have children of their own and failing, she made the choice to adopt, and in that moment when she first saw Manny at the orphanage, she knew without hesitation that this little girl was meant to be part of her life.
Oh, I want to take her home.
All right, you can. Ruchka die.
Ruchka die.
Ruchka die, honey. Oh,
Go for a
buddy.
ride?
Ой, Алёша, не хватай, не борози.
Take it? Where can I take it? Did I bring it over here? There you go.
There you go, mother and daughter outfits.
That's right.
First mother and daughter
That's right.
outfits. Take out their pocketbook.
When detectives spoke with Gary, they were convinced he had no part in what had happened. Yet what they did not know was that he was about to guide them toward an entirely different path. He pointed out that several things were missing from the house. The television was gone. The phones belonging to both Robin and Manny were nowhere to be found. And finally, the car was missing as well. Gary also explained that Robin should have been home around 3 in the afternoon because she never broke her routine. The investigators were shocked because Gary had no idea about the level of violence that had ended Robin and Manny's lives, and what he was describing fit more with a burglary than with a case driven by passion. To solve this puzzle, detectives knew they had to find the missing phones and the car, because once they did, they would be much closer to the truth. On the morning of December 6th, they requested the phone records of both Robin and Manny while waiting for those reports. The autopsy results arrived, and though they confirmed the cause of death, they also added a troubling twist. Manny had died roughly 3 hours before Robin. This meant Manny was already at the house, while Robin was still at work. The question now was simple but heavy. Did Manny skip school that day and stay home, or was there something else entirely? Later that same day, Robin's phone records arrived from the carrier, and they showed she had tried to call Manny repeatedly but received no answer. For detectives, this could only mean one thing. Robin knew Manny was not at school, and she was trying to reach her. That raised new questions. Where exactly had Manny been, and why had she not gone to school without telling Robin? Investigators went to Charlottesville High School for the first of several visits there. They learned Manny had been absent that day without informing her teachers, so they contacted Robin. While a lot of questions about Manny circled their minds, a sudden call shifted the direction of the case. Robin's car had been found just 10 minutes from her home, parked at the Barracks West apartment complex. Detectives rushed to the scene, and though the car offered no phones from either Robin or Manny, a sense of frustration crept in. But one investigator decided to do something that seemed routine, yet would prove crucial. The car was parked near a dumpster, and he chose to take a look inside. There, he found a smashed phone that looked freshly broken. But that was not all beside it, were blood-stained clothes, a distinctive Nike sneaker, orange and black, and several other personal items. In that moment, the decision was made. They would not just recover the items from the dumpster, they would take the entire container for examination.
This is a stock photograph of a shoe that we recovered during the course of our investigation. We believe that the person responsible for this brutal murders and of course, this fire was wearing that shoe at the time.
While the items from the dumpster were already sent to the forensic lab for examination, police developed a theory that the attacker had worn the distinctive Nike shoes and discarded them along with the other belongings. But there were still too many questions, and the answers would only come from looking deeper into the lives of Robin and Manny. At that stage, investigators leaned toward the idea that Robin fit the profile of a passion-driven target. Yet speaking with her closest friends revealed something that changed their perspective entirely. They learned that since adopting Manny in 2000 and separating from her husband, Robin had never dated anyone for 14 years. Her world revolved solely around her daughter and the children with special needs. She dedicated her career to teaching. This revelation shifted the investigation completely. Detectives no longer saw Robin's personal life as the key. Instead, every focus turned toward Manny because hidden within her story lay secrets far darker than anyone expected. Detectives began reaching out to Robin's trusted friends, hoping to understand more about Manny's world, and what they uncovered reshaped everything. They were told that just a year after Robin adopted her daughter, she noticed delays in Manny's development compared to other children her age. It was not severe enough to require special school, but it showed in her struggles with writing and numbers, and because of this, she became a target for bullying at school. Despite these challenges, she was still able to learn, though at a slower pace than her peers. But one fact stood out to investigators. School was never a place she truly felt safe or comfortable.
2 times 9 is?
9, 18.
18, good.
The theory investigators carried with them to the school was that one of the bullies might have crossed a dangerous line. But what they did not expect was that this visit would reveal 2 secrets about Manny that Robin herself never knew. The first discovery was that Manny had a constant need to connect with her classmates and to build friendships. Yet her behavior in class and her comments toward teachers often made students keep their distance, and at times led to her being singled out. In contrast, Manny tried hard to be close to everyone, especially the boys. She often talked about them and tried to get their attention. Robin had spoken to her about the real motive for teenage boys, but detectives learned that Manny's life at school was different from what her mother believed. Months earlier, Robin had found a protective item in Manny's room that was hidden under the bed. In bag written on it, "Remember this." When Robin confronted her, Manny admitted she had spent time alone with a boy named Greg after he invited her to see his guitar, and that it ended with them sharing an experience. Robin confided to Gary that she considered reporting the matter, but eventually stepped back since Greg was the same age as Manny. What Robin never discovered was the second secret. Manny had also been involved with 2 other students at school. She thought of them as boyfriends, but when investigators questioned the boys, they admitted that while they knew her, they never considered it a real relationship. There was, however, one fact that everyone confirmed. Manny had an extraordinary talent for music, especially on the drums, a detail that would become important later. By the end of the day, investigators concluded that Manny was deeply in need of connection with the opposite sex, and despite Robin's many attempts to guide her daughter toward healthy ways of expressing herself, Manny never fully absorbed her advice, which left her vulnerable to situations that some students, either knowingly or unknowingly, took advantage of. By the end of December 6, detectives were convinced that the school would not give them more answers, and the next step should be to look into Manny's online life, hoping it might point them toward whoever was responsible. What they could not predict was that the following morning, everything would change. On December 7th, Detective Stephen reviewed the photographs of the items pulled from the dumpster, and one detail stood out to him as the key to the puzzle. It was not a single object that caught his eye, but rather the idea that all the stained belongings, along with the distinctive shoes, had been thrown together in the very same dumpster. To Stephen, that meant only one thing. The person who dumped them was familiar with the area and most likely lived nearby. With that thought, he headed straight to Barracks West. His approach was simple. He would knock on every door. Some residents were helpful, while others acted strangely when they saw his badge. Stephen quietly marked the apartments that gave him uneasy feelings, promising himself to follow up later. And then came the breakthrough. One resident had a camera pointed directly at the dumpster. The footage showed a man carrying items, but one thing was clear, even with blurry images: the shoes. The man was walking toward the container, and though the image was grainy, Stephen recognized him immediately. But he was one of the neighbors who had barely opened his door, showing just enough of his face to be noticed. That glimpse had been more than enough. The man had introduced himself to investigators as James, but when police checked with the Barracks West office, they learned his real name was Gene Everett Washington.
As y'all know, I live copy overline, you know what I mean?
The first thing detectives did once they had Gene's name was run his background, and what they found was that he was still on probation for a theft and assault case dating back to 2004. This made investigators consider that if he was involved, then perhaps the case was simply a burglary. But if that were true, why so many injuries? And why set the house on fire? Gene was placed under surveillance while detectives searched for any possible connection between him and Manny. To do this, they stepped back once more and began combing through both their social media accounts. Manny's profiles revealed another secret she had kept from Robin. She had several interactions with boys and shared inappropriate content with some of them. Yet what detectives really wanted was to find even the smallest sign of contact between her and Gene. At first, nothing appeared on her accounts. Gene's online presence, however, told a different story. He promoted himself as a local rap artist, performing at venues near schools, and detectives considered the possibility that his link to Manny might not be online at all, especially since she loved music. As they dug deeper into his YouTube channel and Twitter feed, they found that Manny had once commented on one of his songs, saying she liked it, and Jean had replied with thanks. But there were no private messages between them, making the situation more complicated. It was not until investigators looked at his Instagram account that they spotted a small detail that changed everything. Jean had posted a picture of Manny's drum set. It could not have come from her page, because she had never uploaded a photo of the drums by themselves. All her pictures showed her actually playing them. This meant Jean had been inside Manny's home at some point. While detectives began to feel certain they had identified their suspect, an unexpected twist came when a woman walked into the police station claiming she had critical information about the case. Her name was Kitty. When she sat down with investigators, she said she believed her husband was involved in what had happened to Robin and Manny. She explained that her husband owned a pair of Nike shoes exactly like the ones police suspected were tied to the case, and when she looked for them in their apartment, they were gone. When she asked him about it, he admitted he had thrown them away. The man she was talking about was her husband and the father of her child, 31-year-old Jean Everett Washington. To the investigators, this was a golden chance to learn how Jean had first crossed paths with Manny. Kitty explained that the connection began in August 2014, about 4 months before the incident. Jean met Manny while filming a music video for his YouTube channel. She told him she loved music and they added each other on Facebook. After that, Jean introduced Manny to others as a friend who supported his rap. But Kitty noticed the relationship did not feel like a normal friendship, especially considering Manny was only 17 and he was 31. Knowing how her husband liked to boast about himself, she worried about what this could mean for their family, especially since they had a child together. She confronted Manny directly and asked her to stay away from Jean. At the time, Jean convinced Kitty that he had stopped talking to her. But when Kitty learned Manny had been killed, she realized the truth was far darker than she had ever imagined. After the interview with Kitty, detectives were preparing the paperwork to place Jean under arrest, but it seemed he was moving faster than they were. The officer assigned to keep surveillance on him discovered that Jean had already violated the terms of his probation and quickly took him into custody. During the search that followed, officers found something that erased all doubts. A phone belonging to Manny was in his pocket.
You're under arrest for these 2 charges of first-degree murder. That's what's going on right now.
No, sir. I need to talk to somebody.
I understand what you're saying, but I'll tell you right now, you're under arrest for these 2 charges. Okay.
I need to talk to somebody ASAP.
How are you saying I killed these people? What are you talking about? I never killed nobody in my life. I never even harmed nobody. I don't even know these people. I haven't even heard from them.
Jean insisted he did not know Manny or Robin and immediately asked for an attorney, which brought the questioning to a halt. But what he did not realize was that within 11 months, he would confess in a recorded call. On December 8, 2014, just 72 hours after the investigation began, he was officially charged with the capital offense related to Robin Aldridge, the second-degree charge related to Manny Aldridge, and arson for setting their Rugby Avenue home ablaze. From that moment, the focus of detectives shifted toward collecting enough evidence to present in court, and the first step was obtaining a search warrant for his residence. Inside, they found the stolen television from Robin's home. But what truly shocked Robin's family and friends was the revelation that Manny's connection to Jean had been completely hidden. No one knew about it. They were really shocked when they knew that the accused man turned out to be the darkest secret in Manny's life. Detectives now needed to piece together a theory of what had taken place. And the first step was proving that Manny and Jean had been in contact. That proof had been in front of them from the very beginning. Manny's phone records showed 81 calls exchanged with Jean between September and October of 2014. After that, the calls became less frequent. Another detail stood out. The bag found under Manny's bed with the words, "Remember this" written on it. Detectives believed it was more in line with Jean's boastful personality than with a teenage boy her own age. Based on the autopsy report, showing Manny had died 3 hours before Robin, investigators constructed their theory of events. On December 4, 2014, Jean slipped into the Aldridge home and was surprised to find Manny inside. He ended her life in fear and attempted to conceal her body by wrapping it in a carpet and binding her feet. While he was doing this, Robin arrived home and he ended her life as well. Afterward, he set the house on fire and fled around 7:30, taking Robin's car and her phone, which he later smashed before throwing it into the dumpster, where he was caught on camera at 7:57. While everyone was still reeling from the details presented by officers before the rest of the evidence could even be introduced in court, Gene continued to deny everything. For more than 11 months, he claimed the entire case was fabricated against him, that he was innocent, and that he had never known Manny or had any connection to her at all. But while he was being held at Sussex, a state prison in Waverly, Virginia, authorities recorded a call.
You were having sex with a 17-year-old, Gino.
Do you
17-year-old.
Would you still love me?
Just tell me the truth.
You know.
Did you have sex with her?
I'm telling
Did you have sex
so
with her?
many words.
Tell me yes or no.
Yes.
After being confronted with the recorded call, along with the rest of the evidence, in June 2016, Gene Everett Washington entered what is known as an Alford plea. For those unfamiliar, an Alford plea is a type of guilty plea where the defendant does not admit to committing the act itself, but accepts that the evidence is strong enough to convict them and agrees to the sentence. Through this agreement, Gene was formally charged, and the case came to its conclusion with a sentence of life in prison plus 40 years. In the end, Robin Aldridge lived her entire life with one purpose: to give love and guidance to her daughter and to the children with special needs. She poured her energy into creating a safe world where care and compassion came first. Manny was the center of that world, a girl who, despite her struggles in school, carried a passion for music and a longing to belong. Yet that same longing was what drew the attention of a manipulative man who saw her vulnerability and used it for his own gain. In this true crime documentary, we uncover the shocking case of Whitney Bennett.
Whitney was a good mom. She wanted to give them everything.
We pray for peace. But most of all, we pray, Father, that you would guide all who are searching, all who are looking for Whitney.
On December 9th, 2010, Robin Bennett was sitting alone at home waiting for her daughter to call. It had already been 5 days since she had last heard from her. Finally, the phone rang, but the voice on the other end was not Whitney. It was Franklin Whitney's father. He told her that Whitney had left her 3 children with him 5 days earlier and never returned. Had she seen her? Robin quickly said no and called police to report the disappearance of a 23-year-old single mother, Whitney Bennett. About an hour later, Detective Otis Elzey from the Maryland State Police arrived at Robin's home. This was the beginning of a case that started with the disappearance of a young woman and would end with a change to the law in the state of Maryland. At that moment, the only thing on Otis's mind was retracing Whitney's steps on the night of December 3rd, the last night she was seen. According to her mother, she had gone to work at a local cleaning company where she was assigned a job at the airport. She finished around 8 p.m., but there, she crossed paths with someone who would give investigators their first lead, her co-worker Valerie. Valerie told police that after work, Whitney went to her father's house, then stopped by her place where they talked for 2 hours. Later, she called her boyfriend William Hill to go with him to a party on the west side of Salisbury, and that was the last time Valerie saw her. Detectives spoke with William Hill, who confirmed they went to the party and stayed until the early hours of December 4th. He said Whitney went back with him to his family's home and they slept there. But when he woke up around noon, she was gone. Naturally, his story raised suspicion, but William's mother Jennifer confirmed she saw Whitney leave the house around 10 a.m., and his father Claude backed up that account. Still, one question haunted Detective Otis. If William had not seen her since December 4th, why didn't he report her missing sooner? Why wait until her mother made the call? William explained something Otis had already heard from others. Whitney had a habit of disappearing for days at a time. She was overwhelmed, constantly exhausted by 3 children and a demanding job. Otis was convinced Whitney would resurface within days. Christmas was coming. Surely she wouldn't miss it with her family. But then came a phone call that changed everything. Her friend Stephanie contacted investigators saying that in the early hours of December 4th, she had received a Facebook message from Whitney. It said she needed a break. She wanted to get away from the stress for a while. At that moment, Otis was certain his theory was correct. Or so he thought. On December 10th, there was only one person investigators had not yet spoken to: Whitney's friend, Danielle Brown. What she revealed would change everything. Danielle explained that Whitney had been involved in an intimate relationship with another man named Nick Long, and she suspected he might have played a role in her disappearance. She also told police that Whitney had been locked in a custody battle between the fathers of her children, Brian, the father of her 2 sons, and Jay, the father of her daughter. Suddenly, Detective Otis was staring at 3 different men, all of whom could have a motive in Whitney's disappearance. Detectives immediately began looking into each man's connection to Whitney. They discovered that Brian had been her high school sweetheart. She became pregnant with their first child at just 17. 3 years later, she gave birth to their second. But after the birth, Brian grew controlling. He isolated her and even stopped her from speaking with friends like Danielle. Eventually, Whitney left him. After a bitter custody fight, she won full custody of both boys. Later, she met Jay and had her 3rd child. But that relationship also ended. Again, Whitney was awarded custody, this time of her daughter. Now investigators had 2 men who clearly had reasons to be bitter. But after questioning them both, it became clear neither had been anywhere near Maryland, and neither had been in contact with Whitney. That left only Nick Long. Investigators confirmed that his relationship with Whitney had been rocky and at times violent, so they decided to bring him in. What he said in that interview would take the case in a completely different direction.
Just so you know, everything in this room's audio and video recorded, okay?
Just saying.
Give me a second.
Of course, the first question was, when was the last time you saw Whitney?
The Saturday before that had been the 27th.
Yeah, that's when she came to my work and everything. Because we hadn't seen each other for a while.
When was the last time you had contact with her?
Well,
any kind of contact?
The last time I talked to her was that Friday night.
And you only talked to her, you didn't?
Yeah, I just talked to her on the phone.
This point was very important for investigators because if Nick was telling the truth, it meant he spoke to her on the very same night she disappeared. But the crucial question remained. What exactly happened during that call?
And what was the contents of the conversation?
Nothing. I wanted to come see you. I wanted to chill.
She wanted to come see you?
Yeah, it was my day off and she wanted to come drink with me. Her and a friend Steven were actually supposed to come pick me up. She said that she was coming to pick me up, but she never came.
You don't have a car or anything, do you?
No.
Up to this moment, every answer from Nick suggested to investigators that he had nothing to do with the night Whitney disappeared. But what he did not know was that detectives already learned that his relationship with Whitney had not been good. And all of her friends said the same thing. He argued with her constantly. That is why they decided to press him about his relationship with her.
We never really, full out yelled and screamed to each other. When we were in person, we never really argued.
So you never actually left any marks or nothing on there?
I love the girl too much to ever say,
There's a lot of people that love their spouse and will kill them.
Yeah, but I'm not one of those people.
When Nick said he loved her, it was only natural for detectives to ask who could have been responsible for Whitney's disappearance. And that answer pulled the case back to the very beginning. William Hill.
He would hit her and push her down. And
How do you know that?
She told me.
Have you ever seen marks on her?
Yeah. She had a bruise on her left eye, like a cut right here.
Her say, "Don't hit me."
Yeah.
That same day, William was confronted by Nick, especially after seeing Whitney's face bruised around her eyes. That day, William also learned that she had been seeing Nick, but even after knowing about the affair, he still chose to stay with her. During the interview with Nick, Detective Chastity Blades from the Maryland State Police was brought into the case. The main reason for her presence was new information. Investigators had learned that during the party Whitney attended with William, there had been a heated argument, and William had assaulted her. From that moment forward, the case of Whitney Bennett was no longer treated as a missing person investigation. It was now a homicide investigation, and everything moved faster than it had in the days before. The first thing Detective Chastity did was to circle back to William's family. She wanted to confirm again whether they had actually seen Whitney leave the house on the morning of December 4th. They insisted they had, but Chastity could not speak directly with William himself. He had already been arrested and was in custody on another assault charge. When she tried to reach him, he refused to cooperate and demanded a lawyer, with no way to question William. Chastity turned to the one piece of evidence that had always bothered investigators: the text message Whitney supposedly sent to her friend Stephanie. After a long search, the truth came out. The message was a fake. Whitney had never written it. Most likely her killer had sent it to mislead police. Chastity kept pushing for answers, but then another surprise hit her. On January 23rd, police received a call from a family living in rural Somerset County. They reported seeing a silver pickup truck about 3 weeks earlier driving onto an empty piece of land. The driver stayed there for almost 4 hours, His behavior seemed strange. They feared Whitney might be connected. When investigators looked into the property records, they discovered the land belonged to Claude Hill, William's father. Suddenly, investigators felt a spark of hope. Maybe they had found the place where Whitney's body had been hidden. But when they secured a search warrant and brought in cadaver dogs, they were overwhelmed by the scale of the property. It was vast open ground with nothing but a single dirt trail. The idea of finding a buried body out there seemed almost impossible. That day, the search ended with nothing. Yet while detectives were drowning in frustration, another case emerged, one with disturbingly similar details. Another young woman named Gabby had gone missing.
It's been 8 days and 15-year-old Gabriella Blades is still missing and could be in danger.
While investigators are combing certain areas of interest in Salisbury for Gabby, the search is still on for 23-year-old Whitney Bennett.
At this point, detectives were almost certain the two cases were connected. They believed there was a third person involved, someone other than William or Nick, who was responsible for the disappearances of both young women. But with William sitting in jail, the focus narrowed. All eyes turned back to Nick. Investigators obtained a search warrant for his house and his phone. Cell phone data showed that Nick had not left his home on the night Whitney disappeared. A search of his house revealed nothing. And on the day Gabby went missing, Nick had been at work. Surveillance cameras showed him there the entire time. Detectives were stunned. Every lead they had chased was collapsing. Every clue was turning into nothing. But then came day 15 of Gabby's disappearance. Her family called to say she had returned home safe. The two cases were not connected at all. The only link was that both young women had vanished after nights of drinking and parties. More than 4 months had passed since Whitney went missing, and on the first day of April, her mother could no longer bear the silence. She organized a vigil for her daughter. She prayed for God's help because every path they had followed was blocked. The media had followed Whitney's case closely. Cameras broadcast the vigil across local stations. And it seemed that Robin Bennett's tears carried more weight than the fear of any key witness. Her grief spoke louder than words, but soon a real witness would step forward, one who could change the course of the entire case.
Not long after it aired, an individual who had some information decided to share it with law enforcement.
The witness who called did not say he had information. He said he knew where Whitney's body was. His voice was filled with fear. It gave investigators the sense that he might even be involved. But when they learned who he really was, the shock froze them in place.
Charles or Charles? Charlie's fine. He said, well, I just want to see if the police come through here or whatever. I said, why would the police come through here? As time went on and it hit me, the cameras, he's putting the camera right there. He's saying she might be there. This girl is missing. But he never confirmed or told me that's where she was. But that ground had a slight raise to it when I first saw it.
The man who called police was Charlie Hill. He was the brother of Claude Hill, the uncle of William, Whitney's boyfriend. When Charlie spoke to detectives, he was not afraid of the police. He was afraid of someone else entirely. A man investigators had never even heard of. Stephen L. Akers, William's half-brother. The family saw him as the mastermind, the money man, a figure with so much influence that even his own uncle feared him. Charlie explained that when he returned to Maryland in the spring, the family was already talking about Whitney. They said police had been to the property several times. They said officers had searched the land. So they decided to put up a trail camera. When Charlie asked why they needed a camera there, he never got a clear answer. But after watching Whitney's vigil on local TV, after seeing Robin Bennett's tears, he found the courage to tell police everything he knew. Within 2 hours, investigators had a new search warrant for the same land they had combed back in January. But this time, they did not have to search the entire property. The killer had already placed cameras to monitor the site. All they had to do was dig near the cameras. After hours of digging, they noticed a large black plastic bag. Inside was what appeared to be the body of a young woman. With it were all of Whitney's belongings, her purse, her phone, everything she had carried with her on the night of December 3rd. The body was sent to the medical examiner to determine the cause of death. There were no stab wounds, no gunshot wounds, nothing obvious. At the same time, investigators had the painful duty of telling Robin Bennett they had found her daughter. There was no need for her to make a formal identification. Whitney's personal items were all there. Now detectives were certain someone in the Hill family was involved. William remained the prime suspect. But when they pulled the memory cards from the trail cameras, only 2 faces appeared: Stephen and Claude. Investigators knew what they had to do. Both men needed to be brought in immediately.
You even have a guess as to why you may be here.
Knowing what I asked you earlier when I was arrested.
As far as what I know, which is really nothing. I wasn't here.
We found Whitney's body right there, right where your camera's facing is the hole we dug her out of. You get like
about that.
Well, that's kind of your reputation within that you're the brains of the family. You're the one that's got it most together. You own the house. You have the job.
I didn't get back till the 21st or something like that, so I don't know.
The interviews with Stephen and Claude were conducted at the same time in separate rooms. Both of them insisted they had nothing to do with the crime. They said that finding Whitney's body on their land did not mean they were the ones who put it there. They explained that the cameras had been placed only to watch who was coming onto the property because they had noticed a lot of vandalism there. For Stephen L. Akers, the so-called mastermind, he was the most cautious. He managed to present an alibi. He said he had been in Georgia from December 1st until December 21st. Claude, on the other hand, denied being on the land after Whitney's death. But his silver pickup truck was unique. Neighbors had described it in detail. They also described a thin man with a large beard who had been seen there with another man at the same time. Still, Claude kept denying. As for William, who was still in jail during this period, he refused completely to speak with investigators. Once again, he asked for a lawyer. Investigators had no option but to wait for the medical examiner's report. The report confirmed that the cause of death was strangulation. It ruled out any other method of killing. There were no drugs in her blood, no high alcohol levels. This gave investigators a strong step forward, because they already had witnesses from the night Whitney was killed. Witnesses who said William had fought with her. It was not just an argument. He had actually tried to strangle her in front of his friends. People at the party jumped on him and pulled her from his hands. Later, the two were seen talking again, and everyone thought the fight was over, despite its violence. But what nobody knew was that William had not calmed down. He had only delayed his revenge until he could be alone with her. Now investigators had strong evidence. But it was not final. Detective Chastity Blades decided to review the case from the beginning. Maybe she could find something else to pressure William into confessing. What Blades did not know was that the only remaining person in the Hill family held the decisive evidence. Jennifer, William's mother. Blades visited her several times. She told her clearly this was a murder case. The medical examiner had proven Whitney was killed. She told her that her statement about seeing Whitney leave the house would implicate her in the crime. But at the same time, Blades offered her a way out. If she told the truth, she would be excluded as a suspect. After more than one visit, Jennifer finally decided to tell the truth. She said that in the early morning of December 4th, William came to her and told her that Whitney was not breathing. He said he had been fighting with her and did not know what happened, but suddenly she was not breathing anymore. Jennifer's first reaction was to call 911. She actually held the phone. But Claude stopped her. He said, "We will take care of this." After all this evidence, on April 25th, 2011, William Alexander Hill was charged with first-degree murder. Stephen L. Akers and Claude Hill were charged as accessories after the fact. After nearly a year and a half since Whitney's disappearance, the case finally went to trial in the heat of summer 2012. William never confessed, but the prosecution told the story in vivid detail. They argued that after Whitney and William returned home that night and she went to sleep, William picked up her phone. He found messages, calls between her and Nick. Even though he had already known about the affair, rage consumed him. In that moment, he strangled her. Then he told his parents. His father took her body to the family's land and buried her there. Together, they agreed to say she had left the house at 10 in the morning. When Stephen learned what had happened and realized police had already visited the house, he installed cameras on the land. Not to protect it, but to watch, to see if investigators would return to the burial site. The prosecution also laid bare the history of William's abuse. They presented the testimony of his Uncle Charlie and the shocking confession of his own mother. And finally, they showed the false text that had been sent from Whitney's phone to Stephanie to mislead police. In cases like this, juries often deliberate for hours, sometimes days. But in William's case, it took only 40 minutes. They returned a verdict. William Alexander Hill was guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Stephen L. Akers and Claude Hill, the outcome was far lighter. Each received 5 years, with all but 1 year suspended, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. For Whitney's family, the verdict against William brought relief, but the sentences handed down to the others who had helped him were crushing. They felt justice had not been done. Their cries for change did not go unheard. After repeated appeals by the family of Whitney Bennett and the family of another victim, a new law was passed, the Shetty Bennett Act. This law increased the maximum penalty for anyone convicted as an accessory after the fact in a murder case. Before the law, the maximum sentence was 5 years. After the change, it became 10. On October 1st, 2013, the Shetty Bennett Act went into effect. In the end, the story of Whitney Bennett was never just about a crime. It was about a young mother who loved her children more than anything in the world. She fought to be the one who raised them. She sacrificed her own future so they could have theirs. She walked away from high school to work, to earn money, to support the fathers of her children when they would not support her, all because she believed in building a family. Whitney dreamed of stability, of giving her sons and daughter the life she never had. She wanted to be the anchor, the one who held everything together. And for a time she was. She carried that weight every single day, through exhaustion, through disappointment, through heartbreak. When she met Nick, she was searching for something she thought had always escaped her. A partner who would treat her with love. A man who could be gentle, who could help shoulder the burden she had been carrying alone for so long. But instead what she found was chaos, conflict, more pain layered on top of years of struggle. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. See you in the next video.